Xin chào, ni hao, namaste, hello, how are you doing? This is Matt Javit with Nikki Javit. We are a traveling couple coming at you right now from Vietnam to drop some knowledge on some myths, some travel myths this episode, and things that we've heard or we've read that just aren't true on the road. And then we're also going to break down what our next 4 months of travel look like before we head back to the United States after 27 months on the road. So stay tuned for that. Again, if you don't know a lot about our story, I was just listening to the podcast before this, and it gives you the who, where we've been, who we are, where we've been, why we're doing it, and why we love travel so much. Basically, we're just trying to share our story and give travel tips along the way. Obviously, that we're not professional travelers, but we've had the opportunity to do this for an extended period of time. So we're just trying to do our best to share these experiences and also find ways to help you journey better in wherever you decide to go. I've built a partners page. If you're looking for a way to support us in any capacity, I've built a partner page that highlights different places that we use and we work with that are exciting to us. It goes from a wide range. The trusted house sitters, what we just used in Singapore, that's a way to have free house stays with pet visits. Airbnb, obviously. ExpressVPN, it's a way that I hope to be able to watch the NFL playoffs here in a little bit by using ExpressVPN and things like that. Skyscanner, a great way to find cheap flights. And Seven Corners Insurance that we just renewed on our insurance. Things like that are all on the partners page at passportjoy.com/partners. Again, passportjoy.com/partners. And that is where you will find all that information. So go there. As always, if you like this podcast and you're enjoying it, please feel free to share it with friends, but also subscribe, rate, and review. The rating process can really help us get in front of new travelers that might not know about our story. Obviously, we have people that are joining us from different parts of the world. So please feel free to share that and spread the word wherever you might be hearing this. And if you can leave a review, that helps as well for us to get out there. And if you would like to receive a brief weekly email of our adventures from the road that includes other fun stuff that's not just the podcast or that we can include on the podcast, it's not just travel related, sign up at passportjoy.com. It's free to sign up, and then I send out an email every Thursday that highlights the things that we're going through, some travel tips in there, and other hacks and ideas that might help you in your life in some capacity. All right, well, let's get into this episode. All right, before we answer the listener question on biggest travel myths and cultural myths, we're going to talk about our 2019 travel plans. So as you know, the last episode, we charted out in a very long way all the places we've been thus far. And now we're wrapping up the tour and we're heading back to the States in May of 2019. So currently in Da Nang, Vietnam, and we are hanging here for almost 4 weeks because my brother and his wife are coming to town, and we are so excited about that. It'll be definitely his first Southeast Asia trip and one of his first international trips. So that'll be, hopefully with us here, it'll be a smooth cultural transition for them and a ton of fun. So looking forward to that. So we're going to be here for about 4 weeks, and then we head to India for a wedding. As you might know, we've been to India. I've been to India personally 3 times now, Nikki twice. And last year, actually 2017, we spent about 2 full months traveling all around India. And this time we're going to go back to Hyderabad for a little less than 2 weeks for a full wedding for 2 close friends of ours. And that amazing, and this visit their very friendly, welcoming family that we spent time with in October of 17, and do that again. And we're so excited about that. And that's going to be a blast. And it'd be a great cultural experience for us to be able to go through that experience again. And then we're going to get 24 hours in Calcutta. The way that I planned our travel, there was a layover in Calcutta on a flight to Bangkok. But the layover, the way that I made it happen, gives us about 23 and a half hours in Calcutta, India. This is a place that we've always wanted to go. We've talked about. It happened to work out that way. So I went ahead and booked that flight. So we're going to get off our long layover, get out into the city. I've already made a contact to somebody on social media that I'm friends with, and we're going to hang out and see Calcutta with him and his friends and experience that amazing city. I know we wanted to spend more than 24 hours, but just couldn't make it happen. So from there, we go to Bangkok for a short stop because that was an easy transition point for us to get to Australia. So this will be early March. We'll be in Australia. We land in Melbourne, and then heading up to Brisbane and then ending in Sydney. Each of those places, hopefully 7 to 10 days. We're still trying to figure out the timing on that based on expenses and internal travel between each and availability. We've got 2 close friends that live there, so trying to figure that out. And check those places out. Obviously, Australia is high on everybody's list, and a chance to experience Australia for the first time is going to be amazing. And then we wanted to leave out of Sydney because we are meeting friends in Fiji. We're going to spend 10 days in Fiji, in the Fiji Islands. Nadi, I think that Nadi is an island or a city. I think it's a city, but yeah, we're going to hang out in Fiji. That will be my birthday time. Get a lot of beach time. It's just a chance to catch up with my buddy Dave and Deanna. This will be our 3rd time seeing them on this travel escapade. So that'll be a lot of fun catching up with them. And again, it was about 10 or 11 days in Fiji. And then from there, we go to New Zealand and then wrap up in New Zealand. We still very high level. We just know we're going to be there for 3 weeks. We don't really know much else. We land in Auckland, leave out of Auckland. So we don't know. I know that there's a lot of awesome options to rent a vehicle, cruise around town, because they've got these, these cheap accommodations where you can, they're government paid accommodations where you can stay and sleep in beds and stuff like that, based on what I've heard and the research Nikki's doing. So we're gonna dig into New Zealand, but it's far enough out there that we don't have everything planned yet. And if you know anybody in New Zealand, or if you listen to this podcast, let us know. Give us ideas. Australia as well. I mean, we're wide open. I actually, through World Barbershop Adventures, already got an invite in Australia to go to a barbershop there. So that'll be neat to do that. But yeah, and always we're open. If any of these places, again, Vietnam for about 4 weeks, India for a couple of weeks, short stop in Bangkok, Australia for almost a full month, Fiji, and then New Zealand before we head back to the US, wrapping up 27 months on the road. So if any of those places, if you're listening to this, you're like, wow, they're coming to our homeland, they're coming to our city or whatever, just let us know, and we would love to hang out and see you and do that. All right, so that's it. That's the wrap on that. And then back in the States in May, and then this summer, we're still trying to figure out what that looks like and go from there. All right, so a question came up. I got emailed a question from my buddy Brian, and he was like, hey man, was listening to the podcast, and you were talking about safety, travel safety, and the fact that it's safe now to travel the world, which goes against what a lot of people might think. But he was basically asking, what are some other travel myths that we come up against and cultural myths that we've kind of debunked on our journey? And to be honest, as we've set out, Nikki and I had traveled to many places before, not a ton, but we have been to places like Croatia, Greece, Spain, Panama, the country, Thailand, Istanbul, Turkey. We had stopped in South Africa. We've been in South Africa before, India, Brazil, Argentina. So we had a chance. We have traveled before, but those were typically the 9 to 12 day types of trips in those places. So now traveling for as long as we've had, we do get a different eye on what is out there and the differences and what people might think in the conversation we've had with other travelers, and just kind of just things that just aren't true. I mean, when you travel the world, when you see certain things and then you hear, or you just make the phone calls back home and they're like, I heard this, and it's just like, that's not true. It's just, do not believe that. And so we're going to break down a list. I think we got a list of 8 things that we thought of that were important to us to discuss. So I guess the first is to reiterate the safety in travel. So this is one of those things that it's a statistics. It's a statistics thing that it's safer now than ever. You can't fight the statistics, but if you read the news, you wouldn't really see that. But the reality is it's as safe as it's ever been in the world. And it's things like technology that helps all that. Everybody has a cell phone, so it's difficult to get away with things now. And it's not, we're also in this clickbait society where all these different outlets are trying to get you to look at their news story. So they're only going to highlight negative. It's not like people are going to click on the good stories. They just want to see, for whatever human nature is, that we just want to see bad stuff. So that's the stuff that we're going to go towards and click on and understand what it is. So that's all we're seeing. And I read it. I forget if I read it or I seen a movie that Americans learn geography from where wars are. Because that's where, if that's the only time it gets highlighted. So if they see a war in a different part of the world, they're like, oh, that's where Syria is. Or, oh, wow, I didn't realize Somalia was there. And that's how people understand where history is, because they see something negative, there's a war there, and then they go and figure out that, oh, that's where it is in this world. So those are, I guess that safety thing is the pressing one, because people always ask us, well, what was it like there? And we read this, and a lot of it, sometimes it is true, but unless you're in the country and you're around the people and you get to experience it, you get to have a 10:30 walk home at night and you see how safe it is, or you get to experience. And the other thing too is when you're talking about safety, we brought this up to a friend that we were talking to in Singapore. The idea that when I was in Singapore, I walked 5 miles in every direction, north, south, east, and west, on 4 different walks. And I would almost say that almost any major city in America, if you walked 5 miles in any direction, you are going to hit a pocket of danger at some point. It's not going to be safe at some capacity, that you're going to be in a potentially difficult situation because of the neighborhood. Now, in my 5 miles of walking in Singapore, I never once looked over my shoulder. I never felt unsafe. So that's an extreme difference of, hey, is it safe there? They are extremely safe. And we felt the same when we were in Tokyo, Japan, where we had one night we were met out with friends and we walked home and we were walking the streets of Tokyo through the neighborhoods. This is a city of 30 million people. We were walking through multiple neighborhoods at 2 a.m. In Hong Kong as well. So these are major metropolitans around the world where we are safe. Now, yes, there are some cities around the world that there's no way you'd want to do that. But it's one of those things that you just can't just categorize everywhere as being unsafe or dangerous. It's a city by city basis. And just like America has dangerous cities, and I guess from our listeners, I guess Canada, there's different cities that have dangerous places in them, but around the world, there's places that are way, way safer than in many major cities. So I don't want to dwell on it too much, but it's just the biggest myth. And then when it comes to the people, that's why I think that sometimes you just clump it in. You say people are good here or people are good or bad there. And it's more of like, because when you're saying our place is safer than your place, you're basically saying our people are more civil than your people. And that's why it's safer to be where we are, because, hey, we know not to hurt people. And the reality is there's bad people everywhere and there's good people everywhere. We've had situations where it got really awkward at times and we had to face those challenges, but nothing bad, knock on wood, has happened to us. But we've had the same situations in America. And then when it comes to like good and bad, a great story is when we were in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, we were at the Bun Tuk Water Festival. It's a massive water festival. There's probably 1.5 million people there while we were there. And Nikki was in the restroom. She had to go to the restroom, public restroom at this big, massive festival where there's a ton of people just hanging out. Millions of people are hanging out. And it was right across the street from this Muay Thai fight. So there was a lot of street action and it was kind of chaotic. So there's long lines to get into the restrooms. So Nikki goes into the restroom. And I'm outside on basically like this little street area in Cambodia that was blocked off. So passerbyers were just on foot walking by. And everybody had coolers, they had food, they were kind of doing their thing. It's kind of like an American, like a 4th of July celebration in America where everybody has their own things, but there's a lot of festivity activities around too, where people are selling food and drinks and just controlled chaos everywhere. But during that process, people are walking by me and this one guy approaches me because he sees that I'm 6'6" and I'm a white guy and there's not many of those there. And he walks over, greets me, asks me where I'm from. I told him America, and he gives me a beer. So in this process, and then we start to talk for probably 5 or 7 minutes. Meanwhile, Nikki's in the restroom and she's having difficulty because these women are being rude to her, and they're nudging her, they're cutting her out of line, and they want to they're kind of trying to pass her by. So she's having that process, and then within 50 yards or feet from her, I'm outside getting a free beer, talking to some random dude and his kid, and we're just like just having a great time. Nikki comes walking out and she's like, "Who's this guy?" I'm like, I introduced him, and then we just started walking, and she's like, "Well, that bathroom was difficult." And she told me the story. But the reason I say that is because here we are in one location, and there's crappy people being rude in the bathroom, and there's great people on the streets being amazing and handing out, just being super kind. That happens everywhere. People are great and people are bad. And it's not that everybody's the same everywhere, because that's not true. That's what you hear that saying, well, everybody's the same no matter where you go. No, they're not. We've been to enough places now that we see the differences in cultures, and we understand that not everybody acts the same everywhere, but everybody's not the same, and everybody's not different either, because some of the same needs and desires that we have as humans, those go across cultures as well. So it's one of those things that when you're talking about safety and people, it's one of those things to remember that people are amazing around the world. People are kind and welcoming and awesome. There are just a few bad seeds out there that ruin it for everybody, but you just can't clump that and make that and scare you from travel for seeing something else. All right, next myth. Travel is super expensive. We've talked about this many times. We found a way to keep our budget down. There are so many ways to be savvy about travel. We're going to talk about this in an upcoming episode, but websites, apps, points, Airbnbs, hostels, going out grocery shopping, finding free Wi-Fi spots, just leaving behind all the luxury items and living a more minimal lifestyle. It doesn't have to be expensive to be fun, because there's a lot of destinations that have outdoor free things to do. Like even in the Galapagos, one of the most expensive places in the world to travel to. People think it's super expensive, but we found ways to just go hang out on the beach for the day or go snorkeling, diving spots. There's ways that you can do things that are creative that doesn't have to kill your budget. And then there's even places like Japan is expensive, but by the time we left there, we understood that, man, we made this more expensive than we need to in our first 4 weeks. In our last couple of weeks, we started to understand that we can do creative things around food and just how we were experiencing everything, the temples, the Watts you can see. So the free walking tours around the world, the free walking tours, some of them are amazing, but that's a way to keep your travel expenses down. And it doesn't have to be expensive. I know that a lot of the American culture and a lot of the Western culture is nicer hotels. That's the way you travel. Sometimes you do all inclusives. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. That can be an okay way to travel in some occasions, but the more authentic your experience is, I think the more that you're going to be able to take back with you and change in that way.
I guess the next myth we'd like to talk about is one that we get often is that travel is only for single or the younger generation, so to speak. And so during our travels, we've met several couples who travel the world together and several older people who travel the world solo or as couples themselves. And honestly, the bottom line is age just does not matter. And before we left, truly, before we went on this adventure, I thought hostels were for younger people. It was for the younger generation. Like, you're not going to catch me dead in a hostel. And I just thought it was like more of a party scene. But we've stayed in some hostels around the world that are super chic and nice. And there are some not so nice hostels that do cater to that younger crowd. But when we were in Paracas, Peru, we were at this, I guess it would be like Matt keeps calling it a campground, but there was not camping. Like, we were not in tents. You had your own, like, it was an accommodation. There were 4 walls. We had a queen size bed, but the floors were made of sand. So in that vibe, or in that aspect of it, that's why he's calling it a campground. There was the possibility to have a bonfire outside. So I guess that's campy. They had an outdoor pool that you could swim at. It was nice. I mean, I think there was only like 5 rooms or something like that.
It was campy enough that one night I went out to get some potato chips. And as I was eating like my 4th or 5th potato chip, I was eating bugs. And I didn't realize that, because that's how outdoor we were. There were bugs everywhere, and there was flies like that was the most flyy place ever. And but it was a budget stay for us. I think it was $10 a day. And it was amazing. The Paracas spot, I'm not bashing the Paracas spot, because I loved it, because we spent 2.5 weeks there. But yeah, that was a good spot.
Yeah. So for this stay, we met an older gentleman who I would say, I don't know his exact age, but let's just say 68 to 70. And he had owned a hotel in Southeast Asia, had sold it, and he was now traveling the world by himself. And he was staying at this place. And I just thought it was super cool because here he was with people that were in their late 30s. Some people who were staying with us were in their early 20s. And it just kind of broke all barriers down for me because this was early in our travels, within the first 3 months of our travels, where I didn't realize that people in this age range traveled by themselves and did solo travel. And then we also in South America went to other hostels where we would meet older people that were traveling and other couples like ourselves that were traveling and staying in these hostels. And so I kind of just realized that whatever idea of that type of traveling I had before, where it was just all these young kids in their, late teens, finishing up high school, going to do a gap year before they started real life or before they went to college, or someone who was done with college in their early 20s going to travel. Like it wasn't that. So for me, it's traveling really has no age, and it's that you shouldn't think of it from that standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was that guy that rode that motorcycle. We were in Antofagasta, Chile, and there was a Japanese guy that had a motorcycle, and he was in his 70s. He was in his early 70s, and this by himself. And this guy was, I think he was doing the entire coast of South America. That's why he stopped in that city. But and that was a hostel. So that stories like that. And obviously in Europe, we saw a ton of older travelers, a lot of them. And then as we continue, and we met an amazing couple while we were in Phu Quoc, Vietnam. That was a traveling couple that was a little bit older. But I will say this though, this was something that I didn't know would happen before we set on the journey. I thought it would be easier for us to meet people than it has been on the road, because as a couple, and we've talked to other couples about this, it's harder for people to approach us because we're a couple, where when we've talked to single travelers, they're much more approachable by other single travelers and even other locals at times, because I think it's just human nature that if you see a couple that you don't go up to them and ask them if you usually just let them do their thing. And so they're just not as approachable. So I thought that we would get approached more often than we have on our journey. People have been kind everywhere, and we've had some amazing experiences, random experiences by meeting people. But when we talk to, it's usually us doing the initiating. But when we talk to solo travelers, they do have more random, sporadic opportunities because they are by themselves and people approach them. And then that's when two solo travelers will have a chance to interact with each other and come up with a crazy idea and then go somewhere. Where us, we're less approachable than the typical traveler. So that's I guess that feeds into that myth a little bit, but it's still a myth. Transportation is difficult and scary would be the next myth. Again, apps make this easy, but at an outside looking in, when you look at transportation everywhere, tuk-tuks, buses, I think buses is a big myth. Everybody thinks that bus rides in some parts of the world are super scary. We actually just had an awesome couple reach out to us based on our talk of our 14-hour bus trip in Chile, where we went from basically the south to north Chile in 2 different bus rides, and they ended up doing a bus ride as well, and they loved it. So they reached out to us and thanked us because they were going to San Pedro de Atacama, and they took a bus. They decided to take a bus, and that was a big myth for us. Is we thought, man, bus rides can be crazy in some places, and we've taken buses in, like I said, Chile, Peru, all over Europe. And in Albania was kind of like a private bus line that was hugging mountains and stuff. And then when it comes to trains, we took a train in Vietnam, train in India. So places where you think that people are like, oh my God, I can't believe it's so scary there. Or it's not. It's there. You act like these people are trying to die. Everybody has a job. The drivers of the buses have a job to get you there safely, as do the trains. And the people on the places have places to go. They're trying to go to work. They're trying to visit family. They're trying to do all the things that we're trying to do.
Some of these buses that I've taken are better than an airplane. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, they're luxurious. The seats are larger. They're plush. You can lay all the way back. They have Wi-Fi on them. They have movies going. And I mean, we have slept on them and I've woken up and been like, oh my gosh, I'm already here. As opposed to an airplane where I'm cramped up, there is no Wi-Fi and there are not movies. And the trains that we've slept on, with the exception of the one, just in full disclosure, the India train, I mean, the mattress was not comfortable. It was a little bit on the hard side, but I mean, the trains are super, super comfortable. I actually prefer traveling on a train just because it's faster than a bus. You know, buses usually take several hours just because they're driving, they're in traffic, and trains are on a track and it just gets you there straight shot. But I prefer traveling that way. I'd rather get on a train, not have to worry about getting myself to an airport, checking in an airport, sitting around, waiting, dealing with all that, lugging my luggage around. It's like I'm going to a train and I'm just taking my bags and I'm putting it overhead and I'm falling asleep and I'm getting there. And it's so cost effective comparing it to buying a plane ticket that it's like a no-brainer. If we have time, which we do, and that is an option, we will always go with that.
And the part when it comes to short flights as well, when you talk about Southeast Asia, really Asia altogether, and in Europe, there's the shorter flights are unbelievably cheap. So that makes it real easy to hop on, hop off those for $25 to $50. It makes it, and it's all good. Again, it's all, some of the flights, yeah, they're tight, especially for me, 6'6" in some of those places, like my knees, sometimes I don't even fit in the seat, realistically. My knees are at an angle where if anybody was to move, when it was to go backwards, I would be in front of me, moved back, I'd be in a tough spot. But you just suck it up. You do it for the 2 to 3 hours that you have to do it, for flights from like Singapore to Bali or the Vietnam flights or getting to Cambodia or whatever. But it's just one of those things that it's not difficult and it's definitely not scary. So that's just something that's a myth that we think. But that said, the stats on accidents, car accidents globally are an issue. So it's just something you want to keep an eye on. And there's places which you go that you can see that it's pretty chaotic. You just want to be smart on who you're jumping on the back of a scooter with or a motorcycle. You just want to be smart about all those decisions. And yeah, wear a helmet. I know that I haven't always worn a helmet. And it's something that I remind myself, like, yeah, always grab a helmet when you can. All right. Duty free is always cheaper. I'll let Nikki talk about this.
Yeah. So harp on the word always cheaper. So duty free in some cases can be cheaper, but it's not always cheaper. And I hate it when you're on an airplane and they start passing out these magazines or they have them in the back little pocket in the front seat of you. And they're showcasing all these bottles of perfume and chocolates and jewelry that you should buy. Or the first thing that you see when, you pass airport security is this huge duty free shop, or right when you get off of the airline and you're trying to go through security or you pass security and you're in these duty-free shops. And it's like, it's just so misleading. So you see all this alcohol and you see all this food and these products and you ask yourself this question. You're like, wow, I mean, is this really cheaper or am I going to get these products cheaper in town? So I just have an example. When we were in Bali, I was out of sunscreen. Like I didn't have any on my person and I knew I needed some. We were going to be there for a month and they were selling just regular bottles of sunscreen, nothing fancy, nothing like prescription strength, nothing like that. Like Nivea sunscreen for $40 a bottle, $40 US a bottle. And we were buying some other products too in the store. And I just asked the cashier, I said, is this really cheaper here or am I going to get it cheaper in town? And she was so honest. She was like, no, you'll get it way cheaper in town. And I just thought, that is such a sham. Like you have tourists here that are coming here that probably wouldn't ask you that question and think, wow, this is the cheapest I'm going to get this sunscreen. I'm going to pay $40 for this bottle of sunscreen. And it's crazy. And yes, it was still expensive in town. I paid $20 for a little bottle of sunscreen, but it wasn't $40. Now, with that being said, when we were in Singapore, I'll let Matt tell you this about the alcohol.
Yes, when we were in Singapore, the alcohol in Singapore is bananas. I sent a photo to a buddy that 6-pack of Budweiser was 23 Singaporean at the time, which is 17 US. So a 6-pack for $17 US. So all across the board, Singaporean alcohol is nuts. But when you land in the airport, they have big liquor stores there that you can buy at one bottle per person. But it's different because you can buy like multiple bottles of wine if you want to. But you know that you can buy one bottle per person. And because we had a quick 8-day trip in October, we knew this policy. So when we went back, we just went back for the holidays, I wanted to make sure that I get a good bottle of bourbon to celebrate the New Year's. So when we landed, we made sure we did that because the bottle that I got was about $60, $60 Singaporean, which translates to about $45 US. But if I would have waited and got it in one of their places, the same bottle probably would have cost me upwards of $100. So there are some unique cases where you can save some money with duty, but it's not always cheaper. So you got to understand where you're headed to. Street food is unsafe. I guess here, I'll give the Nikki.
Yeah, so street food is unsafe is a myth. So obviously, if you see a person cooking food and it looks unsanitary, like they're sweating on your food or the utensils that they're using do not look clean or there's flies swarming around, yes, clearly that's unsafe. My thing with street food is just because the food is cooked in just because food in general is cooked in what you would consider a proper kitchen does not mean that your food is going to be clean. I worked in a restaurant for several years, and I'm sure most of you out there who work as waitresses or cooks out there know that it's not always the most cleanly of circumstances. Let's just leave it at that in your local restaurant's kitchens. So therefore, what I'm just trying to say is the food carts that are out there where you want to experience authentic food in the street, I just highly recommend to do that. And of course, like I just mentioned, there are ways to tell if food is clean. And most of the time, the food that you're going to get is either going to be deep fried or it's going to be cooked. I mean, half the time we're here in Southeast Asia, you see a woman cooking your food over like a flame. So any germs or anything that was on it because maybe she touched it with her hand or whatever is going to be cooked off anyways. Of course, there's going to be the avoidable foods, like in certain countries where the drinking water is you're not supposed to drink. You're going to want to avoid like the raw fruits and the raw vegetables because you don't know how they were washed and it was probably washed in their water that you're not supposed to be drinking. So don't eat those. If the fruit has the peel still on it, you can eat that. You know, if a drink has ice cubes in it, don't drink that. So anyways, my whole point is all street food is not unsafe, and I don't want someone to go without enjoying themselves while they're on their vacation or an extended stay, because some of my most favorite food is street foods or the local little noodle shop where they're cooking you something for $1 or $2. And I would hate for you to have to think you have to eat at some 5-star restaurant every single time because you think that's cleaner when in fact it's not.
Yeah, and a lot of times locals if I had this a lot when I was going to India, that Indians in America would say, hey, watch out for these foods because they don't want me to go there and get sick. And then it makes it look bad upon their country. So just be smart on that. But you know me, I eat everything. So I guess I'm a little bit more open to the options when it comes to that. But the next myth, this is more of a culture myth, is around American sports and how important we think they are in America. But, so I grew up in American sports, obviously, and I played basketball, but I always thought that American sports were so important globally, but the reality is they're not that important. I've come to this reality, trying to find NFL playoffs here now in Vietnam is almost impossible. Last year in South Africa to watch the Super Bowl, could not do it, had to stream it. When you talk about the NBA, extremely difficult to find spots to watch it. I ended up streaming it in Lisbon, Portugal. And the time difference is big too, because you're looking at, when we were in Portugal, it was 6 hours ahead. So those things, and when it comes to like baseball and hockey, it's just not a big deal. And then college sports don't even hit the radar. UFC and boxing seem to be more globally accepted, or at least watched in other cultures. But soccer or football, however you want to call it, is the world sport without a doubt. I've always debated this with my buddies back home, but now I know it's the truth. So for me, that's kind of a cultural myth that I've overcome. And the fact that soccer is just the most powerful sport, it's not even close when it comes to other cultures and what they actually watch if you're going into a bar or whatnot. And when we were here for Vietnam for their Southeast Asia Cup, literally every screen everywhere was watching these games. Everywhere. You can't even compare it to the Super Bowl, because at a Super Bowl, some people might be watching, but they might be watching for the commercials. They might be going for a party or whatever, but not every screen would be on that particular day. Not every screen would be watching the Super Bowl. In this country, in Vietnam, during those games, everybody was watching these games, and it was just so powerful to see that, and it's such a big deal. But that said, the influence of American music and movies is unbelievable globally. I had no idea that our culture influences in music and the movies and TV shows was as powerful as it is. But everybody you talk to, they're watching our shows, they're listening to our music. Every taxi you get into has American music. Barbershops are listening to it. Restaurants, everybody has American music playing, and they know our TV and our movies well. And that's a lot of times that's how they learn English language. And then as far as when it comes to language, I guess the eighth is the language is a difficult obstacle. It can be. So obviously, yeah, there's places that are different. Japan was difficult. Some parts of Vietnam, depending on how far outside the city you get. There's obviously been places on our travels that South America,
Places in South America, like if you don't know Spanish or you don't know Portuguese, you're not going to find an English menu. Other places throughout the world, although the people do not speak fluent English, or maybe English isn't even their second language, they will most often have a menu that is in English or some sort of something that will help you along, or can mainly speak or sometimes speak broken English. But there's just some places that you're just going to have to struggle through it or use Google Translate and try to get yourself there. So it can be very difficult. It can be uncomfortable, but you can work it out. I mean, it really, I can't think really of any place other than Japan, with that exception, that it was difficult to communicate with people.
And part of that is just the people aspect. It's how you approach it. It's how you the conversation using your technology and how thoughtful you are in that process and how they'll treat you, which leads me to an important part is history. To understand the history of your culture can be really important. We've watched two TV things recently that on Netflix that were really important to us. There was a 10-part Vietnam War series by Ken Burns. So if you have Netflix and you search it, it's Vietnam War, and you just look up Ken Burns, it'll pop up. But it's a 10-part series. Each episode is between an hour and 2 hours, so it's very long. But the detail of the Vietnam War and the way it's portrayed is unbelievable. It gives you a lot of thought, and because we've spent so much time here, it really helped us understand a lot that a movie can only do so much, but the documentary did a really good job that to understand what they went through here during that war helps us understand that maybe talk to the older culture as we're here. So that was important. And there was another movie called First They Killed My Father. It's a Cambodian Civil War movie, but recent. This was in the 70s or 70s, that it was extremely powerful. So again, if you have Netflix and you like documentaries, we suggest that First They Killed My Father, a really good movie. That good as in educational and powerful, but it's traumatic. Yeah, but it's definitely insightful. But I guess to wrap that, the more you know about your people that you're visiting and in your countries and your places you're going to, you can understand how to interact with them better. And just to remember that, and don't be assumptive as travelers that because you're a traveler in some of these countries, that they should cater to your ways. If they want to do that from a business aspect, good for them. It makes sense. But that doesn't mean that you have to treat them a certain way, and always use tact. We are their guests. And hopefully when, as an American or wherever you're listening to this podcast, when somebody comes to your home country, you're treating people a certain way as a guest. That's how you should act like a guest when you're in other cultures. Because if we've seen it so many times, other travelers just a sense of arrogance or just talking to people rudely, that's not how you want to. First of all, I've said this, that I want to portray everybody that I meet. I want them to walk away thinking Americans are so nice. Because if I'm the only American, or we're the only two Americans that they ever meet, because not in the situations that we've been traveling to recently, but in some of the places that we've gone to where it's outside of the normal touristy areas, and they meet somebody, they're excited to meet us. I want them to see a big smile, have a lot of fun with us, and then leave there thinking, wow, that was a great experience. And hopefully wherever country you represent, you want the same thing, that when you go places, if you're the only reflection ever that they've ever met from your country, that they walk away saying, wow, that person was amazing. Maybe they're a reflection of all the people. So I'll just leave it like that. Travel well, have a blast, and make the most of your journey. right, let's be real. Guys don't talk about underwear unless it's a problem or they're having some sort of issue. So that's why I haven't talked about mine. But since you asked, I wear Tommy John underwear. I wore it before we left, and I bought 7 pair, 1 a day, makes sense, right? Before we hit the road full time. And I'll tell you, it was a great decision. Tommy John is a revolutionary men's underwear brand that is redefining comfort. It's the perfect underwear to keep you comfortable no matter where we travel. I wore them climbing up Machu Picchu on this crazy scooter rides of the streets of Ho Chi Minh City. And when I was playing hoops with those kids in Kerala, India, they never rode up because they have the innovative design and proprietary fabrics to make sure that the legs never ride up, the waistband never rolls down, and you never get a wedgie because everybody's worried about that. And their horizontal quick draw fly has been described as life-changing. It is, I promise you, because of the crazy situations we have on the road with the toilets sometimes we see. It is a game changer. Plus, all the Tommy John underwear is backed by best pair you'll ever wear, or it's free guarantee. So if you don't love them, you can get your money back from Tommy John. But I've never had that problem. Like I said, I had a ton before I left, and I bought 7 pair before I hit the road. So go to passportjoy.com/Tommy. Again, passportjoy.com/Tommy to find their latest styles and great deals. If you want the best underwear you can have, whether at home or traveling, any time of the day. And that is it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. This really helps us get in front of new travel listeners that might not be aware of our story. As always, I list out all the important links that we talked about today in our show notes at passportjoy.com. Click on the podcast tab, and I list out all the different episodes there. And underneath on each of the pages, I list out the information that we talk about that'll help you on your journey around the world. You can follow along with our travel updates in our weekly newsletter that comes out on Thursdays by signing up at passportjoy.com. Just go to the main site. You'll see there where to put your email address, click enter, and you'll get a weekly newsletter that we talk about upcoming travel, things that we're doing in our location, tips, tricks, and also just other highlights of things that we're experiencing as we go around the globe. All right, we will be back next week for a new episode. Until then, safe travels to wherever you might be heading next.
Bum 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 bum